He's the former chief of staff of the so-called Israeli Defense Forces. He's the former Israeli defense minister who served under Benjamin Netanyahu for 3 years. He's an Israeli right-winger guilty of war crimes who back in 2009 even turned down an invitation to visit Britain after being warned he might be arrested for having committed some of those war crimes. But Moshe Yaalon has, in a speech, said the truth. Here is a clip from that speech, translated by the anonymous and ever-excellent anti-Zionist Israeli activist who goes by the Twitter handle, I Really Hate You. I'll discuss this clip after you've had a watch and a listen.
מי בעד היפרדות? וזה לא קשור לימין שמאל. בעד היפרדות ולא מדינה דו-לאומית, מדינת אפרטהייד, או ללכת בדרך שכרגע גוררים אותנו. לכבוש, לספח, לטהר טיהור אתני, תסתכלו על צפון הרצועה, טרנספר, תקראו לזה שאתם רוצים, ולהתיישב יישוב יהודי. זה העניין. עכשיו מסתכלים על הסקרים, 70% ברוב התחומים, לפעמים יותר, לפעמים טיפה פחות, 2/3 מהציבור במדינת ישראל, דוגל בדרך א', גם יהודית דמוקרטית ליברלית וכו', גם היפרדות. ולכן פה אסור להתבלבל, כי מי שרוצה לבלבל אותנו זה מי שמוביל אותנו כרגע ללא פחות מחורבן.
אתה אמרת כאילו צמד מילים שלא חשבתי שאני אשמע ממך אי פעם, טיהור אתני ברצועת עזה, זה מה שאתה חושב שאנחנו בדרך לשם?
למה בדרך? מה קורה שם? מה קורה שם? אין בית לאיה, אין בית חנון, פועלים כרגע בג'באליה, ובעצם מנקים את השטח מערבים.
Now, he says the path Israel is being dragged along is to conquer, annex, commit ethnic cleansing, and to establish Jewish settlements. The interviewer there is gobsmacked and says, a couple of words that I never thought I would hear from you ever. Ethnic cleansing in the Gaza Strip. He says there is no Beit Lalia, there is no Beit Hanun. Now they're operating in Jabalia, basically cleaning up the area of Arabs. Back in April, he denounced Israel's strategy overall, saying half a year into a crisis with no end, when the only accomplishment of this government of messianists, draft dodgers, and crooks is its own survival. It's time for soul searching. Now, it really is emphasizing the politics of this man. Avner Givriou, a former IDF soldier turned peace activist and executive director of the NGO Breaking the Silence, declares this is, of course, accurate, but very surprising coming from him. On one level, some of you might reasonably go, why do we need to point to these statements at all? The fact that Israel is committing war crimes is simply an inarguable fact. It's as obviously true as water being wet, the sky being blue, gravity existing. We could go on. Israeli leaders and officials repeatedly made clear they were going to commit war crimes from the very start in their public pronouncements. They have then committed these war crimes every single day, many of them live streamed every single day. We can see they have ethnically cleansed Gaza because they have ordered the people to leave northern Gaza, and they have imposed a total siege there and then used hideous violence and multiple war crimes to force those who have survived to flee. On the 6th of November, the IDF publicly declared that Palestinians will not be allowed to return to their homes in northern Gaza. In other words, ethnic cleansing. Now, it matters because there could be no hiding places for those who help facilitate this crime, in word or deed or both. Even the former head of the Israeli army, the former defense minister of Netanyahu no less, publicly declares this is ethnic cleansing. We said what would happen from the very start, and we were smeared and attacked for doing so. On the 13th of October, I tweeted, Israel is now planning the mass ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. It is not remotely practical, even if it was ethical, for Gaza's population to flee their homes en masse. This is collective punishment, a massacre, all with the direct approval of Western governments. 2 days later, I tweeted about the cheerleaders of Western bloodbaths in the 21st century, and I said, they browbeat us every time with, we have to do something. Critics were monstered as useful idiots. For the Taliban and Saddam Hussein, well, how many would now look back at Afghanistan and Iraq and think, well, thank God we did something. I added, now these sage moderates cheer on ethnic cleansing and avert war crimes because Israel has to, in quotes, do something. Look back at what doing something means. You know what it means. You watched it happen. It means death on an unimaginable mass scale. And for what? And then I said, this insanity has to stop. They have to be held to account. They are not moderates. They are extremists who have the blood of millions of people on their hands. They're now cheering on something which, if it was Slobodan Milosevic doing it, they would be calling genocide. And indeed, if we don't hold them to account, as I said, this is what I said at the time, if we don't hold them to account for what will go down as one of the great crimes of the 21st century, then as Gaza is flattened and thousands slaughtered, they will march unfazed onto the next crime scene. And finally, I concluded, we were right about Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. There is no consolation to be had from those killing fields, because the only point of that horrendous vindication was to stop it happening again. This time, don't let them get away with it, or this horror will endlessly repeat. The point isn't to go, I told you so, in order to pat ourselves on the back and tell the world how smart we are, like we won some public school debating society competition. It's because the scale of the crime being committed by the Israeli state is simply too big and will be recognised as a historical abomination, as I was saying there from the start, that many of its apologists will try and claim that somehow they weren't to know. We're living evidence that this excuse is a lie. We knew what would happen, not because we're prophets, not because we're geniuses, not because of some special insight, but because we listened to what Israeli leaders and officials said. We looked at, we listened to the evidence with our eyes and our ears and arrived at the only conclusion justified by the evidence. We were told by the Israeli state over and over again they were going to commit war crimes. They then committed those war crimes over and over again. As I speak, they're committing war crimes. This was all inevitable from the start because of what they said they were going to do. Now, I want to end with an interview, or quoting from an interview, with the Israeli historian Adam Raz in the Israeli Palestinian media outlet Plus 972 magazine, in which he rightly calls Israel's onslaught a genocide. He says, and I quote, "When World War II ended in 1945, the concentration camps opened and the world was exposed to the most brutal form of extermination in history. I think something of this kind will happen when the gates of Gaza are opened. When that happens, the Israeli public will need to decide which road they're going to take, responsibility or denial. I believe they will choose denial. And this is why I think Netanyahu won the war. I think there's a lot of truth in that, although Israel will undoubtedly do all it can to suppress the physical evidence of its crime. We must not allow that. We must document every atrocity we can. And the Israeli public, the Israeli people, the courageous, truly courageous, exceptions aside, must be forced, like other societies before them, to confront the horror that has been unleashed against the victims of genocide. But this is the point. No crime in history of such a scale has been so confessed to and so evidenced as it was actually happening. And as these latest comments by the former head of the Israeli army, the former defense minister of Benjamin Netanyahu underline, there is no hiding place for those who facilitated one of the worst crimes of our age. Please like and subscribe. Do leave your thoughts in your comments. You can subscribe to my new Substack. That's at owenjones.info. Or you can help keep the show on the road. Well, just help us as we try and... What I'm trying to do is build a bigger operation. Because the enemies have done pretty well, as I keep emphasising, in terms of the internet. So I've got plans, which you'll see as they unfold. I'll keep you posted. But anyway, patreon.com/owenjones84. Press like, subscribe, share the video, listen to the podcast. I'll speak to you soon.